Kaustav.
Hi, Pronob. Hello.
Hey, hi.
Just give me a second. I'm getting a lighting attachment online so that it's
Sure.
easier to do the call. You can hear me well, I hope, right?
Yeah.
There you go. That is good.
Maybe let's wait just 1-2 minutes. I'm sure a lot of people
Oh,
will
absolutely.
come.
Happy to.
Just, yeah.
We'll wait.
Hey, Kaustav.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Robert, क्या बात है?
So where's your hat? Yeah, your party hat is not on.
Today I'm wearing a different hat. You can't see it.
That's nice, right? Kaustav, shall we start?
Absolutely. Just
Hello,
give me a
boys
second.
and-
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on design thinking. And I think we must thank Change at All Academy, to bring all of us here today, who is supporting, the concept of super interns program that, we, brought 15 days back. And today, of course, with me, my friend Kaustav, you are here, right? And I already see around 29, 30, participants joining, and I'm sure people will join in next 2 to 3 minutes, and we are going to spend around 90 minutes with a very I would say an interactive session around the concept of design thinking, these stages and the applications here. And probably it would be good if I introduce you, Kaustav. So with your permission, let me talk a little bit about you, right? Though I know you personally as a good friend, but probably it is good to know about your profile, and I'm sure audience is looking forward to know about you and about me. So here I present Postop Chakravarthy. Of course, he's a good friend of mine, but professionally, he's an executive director, global human resources at Johnson Control Hitachi Air-conditioning. And you see in his title, he is a leader, leads a 75 strong global team members who work closely with leaders, managers, and employees to design and deliver people strategy at their manufacturing, sales, logistics locations around the globe. In his previous assignment with Lenovo Group, Postop served in multiple roles, including as the HR director for Southeast Asia, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Korea, and before that as the Asia Pacific director for people and organization and capability. Postop also worked as vice president, leadership and talent development for Accenture Global Growth Markets, and before that, he also worked with Ernst & Young and some good time with Robert Boss and Infosys. So I'm sure all of you by now came to know that he is the right man towards the design thinking webinar we have. On personal side, Postop bring 2 master degree in business administration and counseling psychology, and brings to the table of over 20 years of professional experience. In the field of corporate HR and consulting, with deep domain expertise in talent and performance management, leadership development, and organizational development. On personal front, Kaustav is a passionate singer trained in Indian Carnatic classical music and plays several musical instruments. And we are honored that we have heard some lovely songs right in some of our gatherings. And of course, his family is a lovely family he has, and very strong in Indian music culture. Wife Dr. Geeta Bhatt is an accomplished professional concert musician and a side psychologist. Kaustav and Dr. Geeta have 2 young children, Manaswi and Sri Raghava. So thank you, Kaustav, for joining today. And probably it would be good to introduce maybe myself, right? A little bit me talking about myself. So my name is Pronob, and you see here my full name is Pronob Chetia. I work for a company called Volvo Group Trucks Operation as a director HR based in Singapore for Asia Pacific region. I would say I'm from Assam as a background from a very humble family. Studied in Pune, then joined I would say grassroots industry. Worked in Tata Motors and joined Volvo Group in the year 2008 as a corporate HR manager in Singapore for last 2.5 years. With lovely friends, 3 of the friends are joining with me today, like Robert, Arun, Kaustav. We go together very well, and we as a concept we thought that why not we as a friend come together, do something for our MBA students back in India, also for students in Singapore. So that's the background behind design thinking. Kaustav, how are you today? Do you think that the design thinking that we are talking today would be applicable for the day-to-day life for the students? So maybe starting comments from you.
Hi, I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
All right, great. So design thinking is an interesting topic, right? Most of us have initially come across this word not too long ago, maybe in the last year or maybe in the last couple of years. And for many people, this seems to be a buzzword. What is design thinking all about? Is it really something that can transform people's lives and customers' experiences, or is it just another fad that is in today, but is probably going to be out a couple of years later? Mm-hmm. But like all fads, I think design thinking has its genesis in some very important insights that senior leaders in the corporate world have derived from trying to respond to the way in which society has been transforming itself over the last few years. So design thinking is not, although the term may change and may evolve into something else, the fundamental concept behind design thinking is based in very sound science and observation, right? Now, the world over the last few years, as all of the audience in this group will very well realize, has become significantly more connected and collaborative than it used to be earlier. And obviously, the most important distinction between the world of today, or the working world of today that this group is going to move into shortly, and perhaps the working world of maybe 10 or 15 years ago, is the advent of social media. So today, this cohort that we have the privilege of addressing today could very well be termed as a cohort of digital natives. I don't think that they would have very many memories of a time when they did not have this very high level of global interconnectedness as a part of their daily lives. Whereas people like yourself, me, or Rob, or Arun, we come from a different world. So we've seen how the social media world has evolved. And although we are very much comfortable with this world today, we also know of a world when we did not have this level of global interconnectedness. In my own case, I was probably one of the early adopters of Facebook and Twitter. In fact, my Twitter ID is @KAUSTAV, which will tell you that I'm probably one of the dinosaurs on Twitter, because I still have my own name as my Twitter handle, which is very difficult to get these days if you join Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing that most people don't know about me is that I struggled for many years to figure out what to do with these. I mean, as an early adopter, you just kind of log in and create a profile for yourself because you find something is happening in school and you want to be a part of it. But it took us a bit of time to figure out how best to leverage these technologies, right? My Facebook profile was probably idle for 5 years before I even put a picture on. Of course, today I'm on Facebook on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And needless to say, the younger generation perhaps doesn't view Facebook as that important. A lot of them are onto Instagram and other portals, which are more aligned with, probably more evolved, I guess, with the way that society is using these tools these days. So I don't have an Instagram profile yet. And
yes, me too.
maybe I won't get at Kaustav at Instagram for sure. I think it's already gone.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to really come to is that because of this very high level of global interconnectedness, there's a social conscience that is evolving, a social consciousness, if you will. So, ideas flow freely across the world in seconds. The best ideas bubble up and are adopted by people overnight. Trends are created at very short notice. And with this kind of a global information sharing backbone that we have today, the world of marketing, the world of business has completely changed. And I'm not just talking about the information revolution world. Obviously, that has evolved as a result of internet, right? But even in the world of product design or experience design, the fundamental way in which we do business has changed. And I will touch upon some of this as we get deeper into the topic. But what we can know for sure is that the way that the manufacturing industries of yesteryears ran their business is not the way in which they're running their business today. That world has already disappeared. And the major contributor is internet. And so design thinking is critical to understand how these businesses will succeed in the future. But going even beyond that, even beyond survival of current industries and companies, I think design thinking is a philosophy that all of us should adopt in everything that we do. Because at the end of the day, design thinking is about putting the user first and at the center of the design experience. No longer are we talking about product-based approach, but it's more a human-centric approach. That at the end of the day, what you manufacture is not as important as how it makes its users feel. What is the emotional journey that it lets its users go on? And so how you create a value for the customer is strongly dependent on the experience the user derives from your product or solution that you're trying to offer. So it's a fundamental mindset shift, something like a Copernican shift. And I'll explain that term later in the program. But I believe that's the answer to your question. Is design thinking relevant? Will it be relevant in the future? The answer to both questions is yes.
Yes, thank you, Kaustav. I think it's a very good, start because, as today we are investing our time for, the students here, and the person who asked, do student need design thinking? And you said that yes, it is very relevant, and glad to know. So let me move forward. What we are going to talk today. So, boys and girls, we are going to know about design thinking. What is design thinking? What are the stages of design thinking? And of course, we will bring some, nice questions and nice interactive options. And we will also have little bit of practical applications. So whatever we learn today, we will try to, apply those learning in today's sessions. And I think that will bring a very good learning experience, to all of you. At the same time, of course, it brings to Kaustav and me as well. And we are going to learn a lot with you guys today. At the same time, as I said, the lovely, afternoon in India post lunch. So it is a challenge for me and Kaustav to, keep you active. So I'm going to bring a short quiz, right, to have some fun. And I'm sure Robert and Arun, you are probably taking some nice tea and coffee in the lovely evening in Singapore. And you are most welcome to join those quiz and let us have fun during the webinar as well. With me, along with the quiz, I will also have, one of the, I would say, intern who will, support us. However, I think it is good that we go back and try to see the wisdom all around. And I would like to bring a wisdom here from Albert Einstein. we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them, right? I would say that, problem is part of life. And I would also say the problem is the first step of continuous improvement. And in Volvo, and as we are a global, organizations, and we love problems. So we feel that, we take the first step of continuous improvement by solving that particular problem. So the problems are nothing but a great idea to make improvement in our product, in our value chain, in our processes, the way we handle people. So I would say that, it is a very essential part of our life. And that's where we will hear from, Kaustav, how to handle a problem more from the perspective of design thinking. So moving forward, let us look a realistic problem, what we have been facing. And all of you, I see now around 43 participants, and I'm sure out of 43, around maybe 38, 40 people are, you are student. And let me bring a realistic problem to all of you here in this slide. And the problem what we saw, 2 months back, is a problem of internship due to COVID impact in Indian business school. And of course, the problem is a natural problem, I would say, because, the first priority in the today's context is health and well-being. Health and well-being is very strategic in nature. We should not compromise the safety, health, and well-being in your personal life, in my personal life, and also in our society and in our company. And there are a lot of measures, came from the government side, from the society, from our own family side. And of course, this has, disturbed the internship, where we go to an office, we do a project, we learn. And that's why we, few people jointly with, Change.org Academy, came up with I would say, an approach or a solution, a solution of 45 days, virtual internship program. And this is what you see in the screen. And let me see if it can be related, to design thinking, and later on Postop can, correct us, or, give some better ideas to improve this. So what we did first is that a few of us came together, we ideated the problem, and we have discovered a solution, a solution of bringing a virtual projects. So we have defined those projects, with a very, good framework. We brought a mentorship guide. We are very happy to have around 20 mentors, primarily people based in across the globe, as well as in India. And then, we got, a lot of applications. We have done some sort of, screening. And then we are running around 8+ projects where we are having a very good learning experience, and mentors and assignment leaders are working, and it's a group project. And we are looking forward by end of July, we are going to have those, reports, those, presentations, key insights and learning. Of course, we have to share those reports in a meaningful way. And this is a new learning for me. I'm sure, all of you, all the students who are, part of the internship program, we got a lot of feedback that at the start there were a little bit of confusion, but now we are on track. We are doing extremely well. So I would say that you see here that, yes, there was a problem, but also we are moving forward. And this is the mindset I think we need to bring to the table, having little more collaborations, having good listening skills, and see that how we continuously move forward in life. Sorry. So I would say that, this is the context, and we will go a little bit more into details of design thinking. Before we go, let me introduce a very, very interesting, quiz. And the audience and students, the option for you to join the quiz is that, you need to use the chat options here. And there is a, Zoom group chat here, if you know. And with me, I want to invite Minal. Minal, are you around?
Yes, Pranav.
Yeah, very good, very good. Minal is one of our intern. And
Hello,
Minal,
everyone.
hi. Yeah, Minal, you can unmute, and then when you need, you can. Oh, sorry, you can mute. And
Okay,
then
Pranav.
unmute and participate as well. Yeah. So why I said Minal is going to support me here. So what you have to do is that I'm going to put 5 questions, and you see here 10 seconds. So you have to answer a question in 10 seconds, which means that very quick. You have to think and you have to act. And you need to come to the Zoom group chat. You have to write your name and options. I'm going to give an options, and then and of course we will have the result at the end. I would say the recognition, the top 3 winners get 1 month of mentoring support from career creators, where I would say it's a recognition for your active participations. We have to find how we support you in a much more meaningful way. So all of you, are you ready? If you have probably understood 100%, probably you can say yes in the chat buttons, just to check whether chat button is working for you or not. I count up to 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here it goes. The first questions of the day. How many eyes does honeybee has? Option number A, 2, B, 3, C, 4, D, 5. You have to put your name and the options, the right answer. Put your name, yes, Griti, like that. Griti, C, like that. You don't write only 2 and all. So 10 seconds, and then we have the judge, your friend Meenal, who is going to keep a tab on that. Ashish says 5, and I would say that 10 seconds is up, and the right answer is 5. The honeybee has 5 eyes, and congratulations, Ashish. I think you have answered in the first space, and then we also get Subhas 4 and 5. I'm sorry, friend, it is only one answer. So let's get ready for the second one now. Which is the first Asian country to orbit Mars? A, India, B, China, C, Japan, D, South Korea. Remember, put your name and the option. Robert, it is not Akshay Kumar. We are talking about name of the country. Yes, a lot of people talk about India. Very good, boys and girls. The right answer is India. This is interesting. How many bones do human beings have? Of course, the adult. How many bones you have? How many bones I have? A, 205, 206, C, 207, D, 208. You have to go one number. Hello, Minal. I hope you are able to keep a tab on the answers. So
Yes, Pranav, I'm keeping a tab.
Yeah, who is the first one who said B, 206?
Rahul.
Hey, Rahul. This is right answer. Thank you so much. Now it goes. Who gave this slogan, do or die? A, Mahatma Gandhi, B, Rani of Jhansi, C, Bhagat Singh, and D, Subhash Chandra Bose. Remember, write your name and the right option. It looks you guys are liking, the answers are coming within 5 seconds. I don't have to wait for 10 seconds, Postop. Great.
This is a different generation.
Right, quick, So, Meenal, who gave the first answer and the right answer?
Mohammad Yusuf.
Okay, and he says?
Mahatma Gandhi.
Very good.
Yeah.
Mahatma Gandhi is the right answer. You can see in the screen. Name the actor in the screen. You have to put the name of the actor here. Right, right. Robert says it is AB, then the right answer has to be AB, right? Amitabh Bachchan. So congratulations, guys. So these are the 5 questions. Stay back for some more questions coming up. And at the end, we will filter out who are the top 1 to 3, and we will learn from Minam. So I would now move to Kaustav. As I said, a great speaker, expert on the subject. Kaustav, welcome back again. And here we go about the concept of design thinking.
Thank you, Pronob. So would you move the slides along, or do you want to give me control?
I will help
you.
You.
Okay.
Or I can make you co-host also. You can also do by yourself, right?
It might be easier for me to
do by yourself. Yeah.
Control the.
Yeah, sure. Let me try to do that. You can start. In the meantime, I will make you co-host.
Sure. So let's start off by. So this was an interesting quiz, right? Pronob talked about honeybees and the number of bones in the human body. There's a reason why we chose this type of a quiz. Of course, it was to incite a bit of curiosity at the beginning of this presentation, but also to lay the foundation for a very creative stream of thought during this presentation, right? Now, as I understand, most of our participants in the group are MBA interns, right? Or MBA students who are in their summer break, and so over the last few years, you've definitely gone through several, how do you say, iterations of teaching yourself or training yourself on thinking rationally, logically, and step by step in a structured manner, right? One of the most important skills that a professional is expected to pick up in the postgraduate study stream is the ability to solve problems logically, rationally, and in a structured way. And we thought we will start this program with honeybees and human bones because design thinking is basically about solving problems in a completely different way, in a completely unstructured way, right? So we will come to this a little later, but even before we launch into what design thinking is all about, I think it's important for us to get on the same page as far as the word design is concerned, right? So let me start by asking you, what is the meaning of the word design in your understanding? How do you see this word? You may please quickly type in a few answers into the chat box. What is the word design for you? I'll give everybody 10 seconds like Pronob did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, we're getting a few answers. Brilliant. Structure, structured pathway, drawing, methodology, blueprint, creation, shape, a prototype, a plan for anything, how things are made. Wonderful answers. Art. So these are great answers. Thank you very much. Now, a couple of answers seem to be different from the others. There's one which was in the beginning that said creation, and there is one here towards the end which says art. Apart from these two, all of the other answers are about structure, design, deliberate way of acting, right? Now, what I want to do is to share with you the definition of the word design as prescribed by a company called IDEO. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this company called IDEO, but IDEO is one of the most innovative and award-winning design firms in the world, right? You probably have not heard of them, but they're a secret weapon for innovation in companies like Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, Pepsi, Samsung. And in fact, many of their creations are iconic. You would have, if not heard of IDEO, you'd have definitely seen or heard or used some of their creations. For example, the very first computer mouse for Apple was a creation of IDEO. And I don't just mean the design of the mouse, but the very concept of a mouse, right? For those of us who use laptops today, the great grandfather of these laptops was the Palm Pilot, which came out in 1998. That was a creation of IDEO, right? If you've seen this movie called Free Willy, which was a very popular movie back in the 90s, and is still today, regarded as an emotionally very fulfilling movie and important for animal rights. This movie, there is a model, a 25-foot mechanical whale model that was used in this movie, and that was the creation of IDEO. So in other words, they were one of the first pioneers in the mechatronic universe. Of course, today we've seen mechatronics used in movies right from Jurassic Park all the way to many other movies, the Star Wars and the Star Trek movies. But IDEO was one of the first to experiment with mechatronics, and they did it brilliantly well. None of us who saw the movie ever realized that that whale we were seeing there was actually a mechanical whale, right? So this company is interesting because they're not a specialist or an expert in any one design. In fact, the founder of IDEO, David Cully, he says he doesn't consider them to be an expert in an industry or a vertical, but rather an expert in the process of how you design stuff. Now, you could hire them to design a coin, a vending machine, a logo, an app, a customer experience, a space shuttle. It's all going to be the same for them because the approach that they've built over the period of years works brilliantly well no matter where they apply it to. So they're known as rightfully the grandfathers of engineering design. And what IDEO basically says is that design is not just about what something is or looks, it's about what it does. Pranab, could you, I'm not able to change the slide. Yeah, there. So the same sentiment is also reflected by this iconic founder of one of the greatest companies in the world, Steve Jobs, as you're well aware, right? So the IDEO principle of design being how things work and how things make other people feel, and not just what those things look like or feel like from a physical standpoint, is critical to identifying how design is linked to design thinking. Pranab, could you move to the next point, please? And the next one as well. So as you can see, these are two other people who are very, very famous in the world of design. The first one, the picture on the left, is that of Milton Glaser. And for those of you who are not aware, he is the designer of this iconic I Love NY logo. And as you are probably quite familiar nowadays, you have this I love and any other city's two letters over here as more or less a standard fare when you go visiting as a tourist to any city or any country. In fact, you will probably find I love BG or BGL or Bangalore or something like that as well, using the same broad schema, the font size, the font, and the heart icon there, and so on and so forth, right? Milton Glaser is the creator of that logo. And Lyndon Leader is the creator of the FedEx logo. Now, FedEx is an interesting logo because it looks very simple and boring. Probably the most interesting thing that most people would immediately identify is that one part of the logo is blue and the other part is red. But the reason that this logo became so popular is because if you see this little arrow that is formed by the lower part of the E and the small x on the right side, once you see that arrow, it is impossible to unsee it. Every time you see the FedEx logo thereafter, you're always going to notice this arrow, as I'm sure you guys will going forward. And so these creators are iconic. These are only two examples of the work that they did. But if you search on Google for either Milton Glaser or Lyndon Leader, you'll find incredible work that these guys have done. And both of them, clearly experts on design, relate to design in the same way. Milton Glaser said there are three responses to a piece of design: yes, no, and wow. And wow is the one to aim for. Lyndon Leader says, I strive for two things in design: simplicity and clarity. Great design is born of these two things. In both these cases, design is not about structure. It is not about process. Rather, it is about experience. It's about how things make other people feel. And so when we look at design thinking, we are operating from this paradigm, which is the same paradigm that the gurus of design have tried to express to people like us who are studying design. Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. Now, before moving into the concepts of design thinking, I do want to run a quick experiment with you guys. Can anyone in the audience identify what is wrong with all these three pictures of doors that are commonly publicly seen in commercial establishments around the world today? If you have an idea, in 10 seconds, please just type it into the chat window. What is wrong with these pictures in all these cases? What is wrong with these doors? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Brilliant. And I think most of you have guessed it. The problem is confusion. We don't know what to do with these doors. Are they supposed to be pulled? Are they supposed to be pushed? Do we need to pull them backward and forward towards us and away from us? Or do we need to move them sideways? And in fact, these doors are what are called Norman doors. So Pronob, if you can click once again, please. These doors are all called Norman doors. And the word Norman door is not a compliment. It is a derogative statement. Because apparently the first time that this problem was identified was when some office professional in the US, whose name was Norman, made a hue and cry about it in one of his offices, and then that post went viral, right? And since then, these kind of doors have been derogatively or it is derisively called as Norman doors. Now, a door is a very simple thing. It's probably one of the most frequently encountered items of everyday use. Every one of us has to struggle with a door at least once on a daily basis, right? And if something as simple and as widely prevalent as a door, something with a universal design, almost every door in the world looks and feels the same. It works the same. It does the same function. And therefore, it's one of the most universal designs out there, like a bicycle or like a vessel or a plate. A door is a universal design, right? So if something as ubiquitous as a door could not be well designed, then it is easy for you and me to understand why design thinking is not commonsensical. It is not natural. That we need to adopt a certain discipline in order to arrive at products which embody the right spirit of design thinking. Moving to the next slide, Pranabda. Right? So why do we have this problem? Why is the door so poorly designed? It's a wonderful question to ask. Most of us in engineering or in the MBA programs take a door for granted. But what that door example reveals to us is that human beings are unfortunately victims of ingrained patterns of thinking. We call these ingrained patterns sometimes as schemas or engrams, right? Schema is a better word because engram is more about emotional meaning. Schema is about the physicality of things. So the easiest way to understand something like this is to understand how human beings navigate the world. What we try and do as we learn more about the world around us as we become older from children is that we build these mental maps of the world around us, right? And those mental maps are heavily influenced by unconscious biases. For example, if you grew up in India, one unconscious bias that almost every child in India learns is never to step on the door sill. Have you ever thought about that? No one ever told you don't step on the door sill, or probably someone did, but you forgot about it. You have no more memory of when was the first time that someone told you not to step on the door sill, right? But almost every Indian steps over the door sill, never on the door sill. And somewhere we feel it is incorrect, it is wrong, it is something unnatural to step on the door sill. You will not find this behavior in many other cultures. This is a uniquely Indian culture, cultural behavior, right? Why is that the case? Because on one hand, probably somebody when we were children, very young, impressionable, a figure of authority told us, don't stand on the door sill. Up to that point, we were doing it. You can still see kids who are very young do it, right? They don't understand the difference between standing on the door sill and stepping across it. But somewhere someone tells them don't do it. Now, why did they say don't do it? They would have no idea. It's just cultural behavior that is ingrained in the psyche of the country. And then over a period of time, we start making reasons for it. Well, you don't stand on the door sill because you editorialize, you rationalize. The difference is that rationalizing is about factual or logical sounding statements. Editorializing is about opinions, good versus bad. So you do both, right? And at the end of that, you pass on the same cultural trait to your children. Don't stand on the door sill. Why? I don't know. It must be something useful, something important. Bacteria will not come into the home, something like that. Maybe true, may not be true. I'm not challenging the validity of the behavior. What I'm saying is it's an unconscious bias that we build into the system. Another way that in India we are biased is that we typically drive on the left of the road. And so you will also see that adults typically walk on the left of the road. If there are two pavements on either side, you will tend to walk on the left of the road, the pavement to the left of the road compared to the direction in which you're walking. If you're walking around a walking path in a garden or a park or in your apartment complex, you will tend to automatically walk to the left and allow the right to somebody else, even though technically you're not on a road and road rules don't apply. It's an engram, it's a schema. So if when Indians go perhaps to a country that doesn't adopt the left side of the road rule, but rather drives and walks on the right side of the road, it becomes pretty confusing. You don't understand why people are coming and banging into you on the pavement all the time until you go through a painful process of changing your mindset to walk on the right side of the road. Now, these kind of engrams, basically, or schemas, prevent us from seeing situations that are out of the box. And most of the challenges with design are about understanding what design is not. Design is not basically doing the same thing that you did the last time, but making an incremental change. Good design is about changing your encumbered thinking into a fresh mindset, unencumbered thinking. So looking at a problem from a fresh mind. And sometimes this can cause really creative, but never before thought of solutions to come up that when you look at it in hindsight seem to be the most logical idea. Example, some of you would have heard the story. There are several real life incidents where, these large container trucks were driving down the highway and then suddenly came up upon a bridge which was crossing the highway and realized that they were too tall by a couple of inches to cross the bridge. So the container truck therefore was stuck on one side of the highway because the lower edge of the highway otherwise would impact the container, and probably the difference was just a few inches, maybe 6 inches, right? But essentially that meant that the container truck could not move to the other side of that bridge. And so the story goes that one truck was one day stuck on a highway in the same way. And, the driver called his company, the company called their design engineers. Then there were the city's county civil engineers who came in, and everybody was trying to wonder how to get this truck unstuck, because it had already progressed without knowing a few centimeters into the bridge. And now essentially it was stuck under the bridge. Right? And then while all these people who are experts in the problem were kind of piling around and trying to figure out an answer, a young teenage boy walks up and tries and inquires from somebody, what is the problem? Why is everybody here? And when he's told the problem, he says, look, it's a simple thing, right? Why don't you just let a little bit of the air out of the tires, and then the truck will sink, and then probably you can drive it through and it should be fine. And eventually what all the engineers realized was that was probably the only answer that would work. And so they actually let air out of the tires of the truck, just enough so that the container could pass under the bridge without scraping the top. And essentially then the truck was released and moved on to its destination, where it probably refilled its tires with air. Right? So this is a clear example of an encumbered mind versus an unencumbered and fresh mind looking at the same problem. And design thinking is very, very important that we try and understand, adopt the mentality or the mindset of an unencumbered mind. So what is design thinking all about? It is not about structure, it's not about process. On the contrary, it is messy, it is iterative. It is highly creative. So all of the learnings that we had as engineers or MBA students, when we look at design thinking, we need to throw it out of the door. And it is about simple mindset shifts, new ways of looking at problems. But how do you look at them? You look at them through the lens of empathy and collaboration. Empathy is because, how do you define empathy? It is about seeing things from the other person's point of view, but more importantly, feeling a little bit of what that other person is feeling. Sharing a little bit in that other person's emotion is what we call as empathy. And so when we do that, when we look at how the other person is experiencing what we are trying to design and manufacture and deliver, then probably we'll design and manufacture what we're doing in a different way so that it's a little better for the other person to use. Now, there's this constant idea war between Apple and PCs, right? In the early generation, which today has devolved into a war between iOS and Android. You ask the average iOS user, he or she is completely mesmerized with their gadget and can't believe that someone would use something as clunky and as poorly designed as Android. You ask the average Android user what he or she thinks about their mobile phone, and they will see absolutely no problem with the way that they're using their phones. And on the contrary, ridicule an iOS user as someone who's got a lot of money and very little brains, because he or she is stuck in a proprietary operating system that rations out features based on how they want their products to sell, right? Both parties are right in their own way and wrong in their own way. But what is shared between both these parties is that they're looking at their product or their mobile phone from the lens of their experience. Nobody's really bothered about the Apple product looking the way it does, as much as they're bothered about how it makes them feel, what kind of experiences gives them. Apple products are brilliant and beautiful for those that use them, because they get used to how they use these products and can't move to anything else. On the contrary, Android product users are the same. they're used to a certain way of freedom, a certain kind of compatibility with other, app manufacturers, a certain ecosystem, a certain look and feel of their apps, and therefore they are not willing to let go of that feature set and migrate to Apple. So it's very difficult to look at how many people migrate from Apple to Android or Android to Apple. Those numbers are not very large. So that being the case, it's all really about a human-centered path to innovation, right? Design thinking starts with people. Let's move to the next slide, please. So, Prodha, I think this is your quiz.
Yes, so I'm back with a quiz again. And this is a quiz all about the insight that you have got from Kaustav. So which of the following is not one of the stages of design thinking? Number one, mass produce. Number two, define, see, prototype, and D, empathize. Minal, probably you are with me here, and many people talk about A, so of course it has to be, the answer is A, mass produce. Here is the second one.
Ashish is the first one to answer.
Sorry?
Ashish is the first one to answer, mass produce.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hello, Ashish. Design thinking is a type of A, convergent thinking, or B, divergent thinking. So, Kaustav, what is the right answer?
So what I'm going to do for this question is keep the answer to myself for now. And when we run through the slides and discussion, I think the participants will clearly realize what kind of thinking it is, right? So let's keep this question quiet for now.
Okay, very good, very good. So do you want to have any comment? Why mass produced? Just a very quick 1 minute comment.
Okay, so again, both these questions were designed to understand the current level of knowledge and understanding of the audience as far as design thinking is concerned. Right. So we will explain what are the stages of design thinking in the next few slides. Right. And then we will, as part of that, I think it would be very intuitive to understand why mass produce is not a part of design thinking.
Perfect, perfect. So now we move towards the next part here.
Right.
And we have a process coming up, right?
Right. So let's keep this on the slides for now. Let's not move into the next box. So friends, design thinking, therefore, is a new concept. What was there before design thinking, right? Products were still being designed and used and consumed, and millions and billions were still being made. The door that I gave you as an example is one example, but there are so many other designs elements today that are ubiquitous. One other element I mentioned is the bicycle. Everybody uses a bicycle, and all bicycles almost look the same. But not all bicycles used to look like the current version of the bicycle when they were first started. As some of you are well aware, the early bicycles used to have very big rear wheels and very tiny fore wheels, right? Front wheels. And another big difference would be that the pedals in the modern bicycle are connected via a chain to the rear wheel, whereas the early bicycles had these pedals molded onto the front wheels, welded literally onto the front wheels. So design has changed for the bicycle, but over a period of time, the modern version of the bicycle is a classic example of a product that has become ubiquitous, a design that has become ubiquitous, right? Now, how did we arrive at these kind of designs? Traditionally, the approach was quite simple. It was about linear, structured problem solving. A person who would, inventors, as they used to be called in those days, would create a new kind of product. And, their job would be inventing. They would make many, many, many new ways of living life. And if you look at some of the early inventor shows, you would find some very comical expressions of inventing, right? In fact, one of the early Charlie Chaplin comedy clips shows Charlie Chaplin as an inventor, or probably as a test subject for an inventor, where he is seated at a table and there's an automatic machine that's chopping, frying eggs and chopping vegetables and feeding him breakfast. And unfortunately, as you might expect, because it's a comedy sequence, the machine goes wrong, and instead of feeding him, basically drops the food on his face and slaps him around, and leads to slapstick comedy. So these inventors, therefore, some very well-known ones, for example, made a huge impact on the world. Nikola Tesla is a classic example of a person who was able to eventually propagate his theory of alternative current as opposed to Edison's version of direct current into what today we see as the predominant force of electrification in the world, right? Or R.L. Stevenson, who was the one who created the steam engine, which became a predominant design element for almost 70 or 80 years, and was one of the prime elements that led to the Industrial Revolution and the propagation of what we today call Western culture across the rest of the world. In fact, the colonial expansion was primarily based on the steam engine and its use both in maritime as well as in rail circumstances, right? So in all these cases, these inventors used to follow a very structured approach. You start with a problem, you try and figure out how to solve the problem by making a list of various options, but all of them are basically aimed at solving the problem. So if I need to produce power, if I were R.L. Stevenson trying to invent the steam engine, now the big thing, the big turning point for Stevenson was when he was at his kitchen, in his kitchen eating breakfast and trying to solve this problem of creating power, energy in his mind, motive power. And at the same time, the tea kettle in that kitchen started whistling. And when he looked at the tea kettle, you know, the lid of the teapot was being lifted by the power of steam that was hissing out and causing the tea kettle to sing. And that gave him the idea that if steam could be so powerful that it could lift steel off the top of a pot, maybe that same steam could be used to turn a wheel. And therefore, you know, that started the whole advent of the coal-based steam engine design concept, and which led to everything else in terms of the Industrial Revolution in the future, right? So in that case, he looked at inspiration from an outside source, and having found that inspiration, refined the solution until it was completely, you know, synchronized, smooth, and synergized into an easily replicable, mass-producible solution. The case of the engine, the first internal combustion engine, right? All of us know Vin Diesel, and most of us have used diesel cars. But the gentleman who created the first internal combustion engine, his name was Diesel, and that's why, you know, the early engines were all called diesel engines. So Diesel had the same kind of epiphany. I mean, he tried to solve the power of motive power, but not based on coal and not based on these huge, massive engines, but something that could be fitted into a much smaller form factor and could run on smaller amounts of fuel and much more efficiently. And he had to experiment for many years before he finally solved that problem and arrived at the internal combustion engine, right? But at the end of the day, he started with a bigger problem and tried to refine it. So it was a reductive approach, convergent thinking. So the solution in all these cases was found by testing various alternatives to arrive at the right answer. Take the case of the light bulb. Again, a ubiquitous design concept in today's world, right? As most of you are aware, the light bulb was invented by Thomas Alva Edison, who's also, by the way, the propagator of DC current energy. And the story goes that he tried 9,999 different ways of creating a light bulb until he found that one final way, which was a tungsten filament suspended in a vacuum tube, which eventually became the ubiquitous and predominant global form factor for a light bulb, incandescent bulb, right? And how he went about it, therefore, was also convergent thinking. I want something that produces light in darkness, right? What I have to play with is energy, whether it is DC energy or AC energy. And I know that light can be produced by items glowing in the dark. So his whole process was identifying the right element for the filament inside of the vacuum tube. His realization that, you know, there needed to be vacuum inside that bulb came early, because he did realize that something in the presence of air would oxidize and therefore eventually reach such a high point of temperature that it melted. But fine tungsten, that was another problem. He had to go through so many different elements until he finally accidentally again discovered that tungsten would only glow and not melt in a vacuum, right? But again, there was reductive or convergent thinking there, finding the right answer. Pronob, can you move to the next 2 click points, please?
Yeah, I tried to give I think, can you try? I think you can do by yourself. I just tried now.
I am trying, but I am not able to.
Yeah,
something did happen.
Yes, you can now.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Now, on the other hand, all design thinking is not about this traditional linear and structured way. Rather, what it is about is iterative, unstructured, and it starts with an experience. So this is why it is so messy and it is so unpredictable. And secondly, it cannot be done by one person. You or me alone sitting in one corner cannot arrive at a design thinking version of a current product or service. it needs the expertise and experience of many people who are experts in many different fields, but who all have a common focus factor, which is that of the customer's experience. So it starts with empathy. It is iterative, it is unstructured. Even though I will show you certain phases of design thinking, what is important to keep in mind is that it is not a predefined sequence of those phases that results in a great product, but rather an iterative, messy, haphazard, random sequencing of those phases, with the ultimate aim being that the customer needs to have a certain type of experience. So that's what design thinking is all about. Moving to the next slide. So what are the stages of design thinking? Now, number one, very surprisingly in design thinking, the first stage is not design. It is not even study of the existing product. The first stage in design thinking is to empathize. What is the meaning of empathize? To feel what the customer is feeling when he or she is using your product or experiencing your service. An example of how design thinking can work, for example, not just with designing a product, but with designing a service experience, is how would you design a hotel experience for a customer? Most hotels start off in a very traditional way, right? You have an entrance, a door, and beyond the door, you have a desk where there's somebody sitting. And this person's job is to not welcome the customer really, but to understand what that customer wants and see if you can satisfy that need or not. So what kind of room do you want? There's an assumption that when you walk into a hotel, you need a room, right? You might say, well, of course, that's why a hotel exists. But I might say that the design thinker doesn't think like that. We'll come to that later. Then you say, okay, you want a room. Great. Now we've got these kinds of rooms. These are available, you know, a double room, a single room. The beds are together. The beds are different. There's a non-smoking room. There's a smoking room. This one has a garden view. That one's a mountain view. And this one has a lake view or a sea view. And then you kind of guide the customer through a series of choices, and each one has a price attached to it. And so it becomes a very transactional kind of relationship, right? But while those were probably the early hotels, I think pretty early on, hoteliers realized that the customer doesn't just come to a hotel to spend the night. You know, there are obviously inns or motels which kind of do that function for you. But over a period of time, the hotel experience evolved into something very different. So today, when you walk into one of the larger and well-known hotels, which customers frequently visit, you realize that the experience to the hotel starts not from the physical hotel itself, but from the way that the website is designed. The website is designed, hopefully, to be warm, welcoming, easy to navigate, gives you all of the information you need, allows you to get in touch with a human being who gives you that warm hospitality experience. So hotel today is no longer a hotel. It's not about a room. It's about hospitality. We don't even call that industry the hotel industry anymore. We call it the hospitality industry, right? So from being a product-based function industry, that industry has evolved into an experience-based industry. It's a classic example of design thinking in action. So the word design thinking may be new, but the thought and the concepts behind it are not new at all. It all starts with understanding how the customer experiences your product or your service, and then starting to design that customer experience. That is what design thinking is all about. So you start with empathy, and then you move into defining what, right? Defining what aspects of the customer experience you want to take ownership for, and you want to influence, you want to change. So you manage a customer's moments of truth, points of impact with your business or your service. From that point on, you move into the next one, which is ideate. So now that you have defined that this is what the customer experience touch points with my business are, that I want to influence, the most important ones, the next step is obviously to ideate, to figure out how you're going to influence or change those customer touch points. And this is where a lot of creative thinking comes into play. So unlike in the previous traditional process, where the focus was really on reductive thinking and solutions, the right answers, here, this is about expansive thinking, where we are talking about many different creative ways to create an experience or influence an experience. Then the next step is about prototyping. Now, what happens in prototype is that you rapidly and iteratively build a series of minimum viable products or MVPs, which satisfy those basic requirements that you've laid down for yourself. So a customer is able to experience my product in these ways, and I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. So if I'm going to try this particular type of experience for 5 days, I will try the next type of experience for another 5 days. At the end of say 4 or 5 of these various experiments, I'm going to arrive at the final best possible outcome, and then I'm going to test it. So a prototype is tested in a sandbox, if you will, perhaps a not live environment, or even if it is a live environment, a very limited kind of a pilot. But a test is a broader based pilot, which is actually occurring in the wild. And we are trying to not just experiment with your product or your experience, but you're also actively seeking feedback on how that experience worked best. So these are the 5 typical stages of design thinking: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And just so for the students in you who are a little curious, there are many companies and many organizations that define and describe design thinking in many different ways, but you will see as you do a bit of study on this on the internet that these 5 stages are almost common in all of them. They may name them differently, they may add a step or two, but this is the basic minimum set of 5 that you need. And for your reference, we've taken this set of 5 from the concepts of design thinking embodied by Stanford University's D School. D School is basically the name that they use for their design school. And because these are the simplest and easiest ones that we could find and had a lot in common with all of the other content that I could find on the internet, we decided to share this with you. So the 5 stages of design thinking, as I'm sharing here, are empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. Now, we will quickly go into each of these in more detail. I'm leaving that outside for now because we will be covering it in the next slide. So what does empathize consist? Protha, do you want to run the slides, or because I see the mouse also, I think every time there's this change in the mouse position,
Okay, sorry.
the system moves the control to you. So I'm not able to change the slides. So I'm okay with doing either.
No, you can go ahead. Sorry. I don't know.
All right. Thank you. So therefore, what does empathize consist of? Now, empathy starts by observing another person, right? Only when you see the other person are you able to understand how they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And so typically empathizing phase in design thinking starts with these 3 basic elements: observation, interviewing, creating what we call personae, and a customer journey map, right? Now, you might, in order to better understand this whole concept, it's useful for you to take a product or a service that you favor, that you would like to apply these concepts of design thinking to, and then try and relate what I'm saying to that particular product or service. Now, if I were to take the last example, which I gave you, which is a hotel experience for a customer, right? Hospitality experience. If I were to re-engineer that hospitality experience using design thinking principles, let's say a major hotel chain. In fact, this really happened. Some of you might have heard of this hotel chain called Intercontinental. Today, it's one of the foremost hotel chains in the business world, and executives from across all business industries prefer to stay at Intercons no matter which city that they're traveling to. But in the early 1980s, 82 or 83, this company was running under huge loss. It used to be called, I think, the International Hotel Group or something like that, IHG in those days. And their cost structure was 20-30% higher than their competitors. They had very high attrition. Customers were not coming back to their business. Customer feedback was poor. And so the management team went through an entire exercise to re-engineer the customer experience in these hotels, right? And one of the ways that they did it was by looking at these aspects. So observing how a customer interacts with your product. This sometimes can lead to huge insights, because typically engineers or process designers look at the product first and then work outward from there. So I've got a hotel. I assume that the first time that the customer comes face to face with my hotel, their first moment of truth is when they stand at the hotel doorway. And so all my effort or all my resources would be focused on making that doorway look impressive. Massive stone cladding, waterfall, architectural elements, a big mustached security guard who does with this very smart salute when you go to some of our Indian hotels. Now, this is great. But in today's world, the first time that a user comes into contact with the hotel is very rarely the hotel itself, the physical hotel, right? More often than not, it's probably a website. In fact, more often than not, it's tripadvisor.com or one of these review websites, right? And so if you're not managing your user's experience at that point, you're letting yourself open to failure. You're allowing parts of the user experience to go unmanaged, and therefore the outcomes can be unpredictable for you, right? And so observation ideally would teach the business leadership that is where you should start influencing the experience of your customers. So in other words, empathize with your customer, walk in their shoes for a day, create a persona. Who are the typical types of customers who come to your hotel? Who are the typical types of customers who use your product? Make a persona for each of those. So segment your customers into different groups and make a representative imaginary person for each of those groups. That imaginary person will have all of the attributes that a human being typically has. It would have an age, that persona would have a gender, would have preferences, would have values, would have a language preference, not in terms of languages, but in terms of languaging, right? What kind of keywords would they use? Would they be formal? Would they be casual? Would they use slang? So a persona like this is created. And then you create multiple personas. And then you say, okay, now these are representative examples of the people, the typical groups of people, customers who use my product or my service. So then you create a day in their life to understand how your product touches their life. And that is the first step in empathizing. So once again, empathizing is about putting yourself in your customer's shoes, understanding what are the various ways in which your product influences their life and creates an experience for them, and then choosing which of those experiences are the most critical ones for you to impact. Which really brings us to the next point, define. So the define phase is where you're trying to understand from all of this input that you just gained using empathy, you analyze and synthesize all those observations and identify and articulate specific human-centered problem statements, right? So you mix and match the observations that you had with the persona that you've created. In other words, you integrate all of the data you got from the empathy phase, and using cross-functional teams, that is not just maybe the product design guys, but in the company, you also involve the marketing people, the sales people, the design people, the finance people, the human resources people, all of the people who you know have some critical experience that you need. Why would you involve human resources people in product design, you might ask? And the clear answer is human resources people, most people or peoples who have OD backgrounds usually come from a psychology background. And so to understand how a customer uses your product or what is the motivation behind the customers using your product or service, that psychology background becomes extremely important. So you're able to predict that if the experience is engineered in a certain way, this is how the customer would typically interact with your product and basically use your product and how this would make them feel. So psychology is very important. So therefore you would use cross-functional teams in order to analyze and identify common observations from all of this data. And then the last step is to, like I said earlier, to articulate a specific human-centered problem statement. What does that basically mean? It means you identify that this is where the product or service is today. This is the kind of impact it's creating on the customers. This is where it needs to be. This is the kind of experience that you want that product or service to create. And this gap is not being able to be bridged because certain reasons. So a problem statement has a very clear syntax, right? It is, I am at X today. I want to be at Y, but I'm not able to get from X to Y because, and then you lay down a series of specific statements, why. Those statements could be everything ranging from A, I don't have the resources inside the company, the expertise inside the company. Could be C, I don't have the right kind of technology. D, I just don't understand the customer that well to be able to make that gap. So when I say I don't mean I as an individual, but I mean we as a company, right? So it's about a culture problem in the company. So you list down a series of 4 or 5 key tangible areas of your organization that you can impact, that you can change in order for you to bridge the gap between where your product or service is today and where you want it to be in terms of customer experience. This is what we call a human-centered problem statement. One example from the hotel industry again is, my customers are not able to find me on the internet today. So I want to be found, but the right customers are not finding me on the internet. And the reason is maybe my company or my hotel doesn't come up on page 1 of Google search. Or even if it does, the only thing that comes out on page 1 of Google search is all the negative mouth shut reviews. And therefore the customers are being turned away from you. Once you identify that this is a problem, you can go to the next step. So stage 3 is basically ideate. Now in ideate, you use a series of techniques, which are all creative thinking techniques in order to understand how to change that aspect of your customer experience. Now, once again, please keep in mind here, this is still not reductive thinking. I don't have the right answer already. Why don't I have the right answer? Because we're talking about human beings and their motivations. So there is no right answer. Rather, you're trying to find out, I need to influence this aspect of my customer's experience. How do I do it? In that sense, the more number of answers you get, the better. So you start with a creative ideation strategy. And at the end of it, once you had as many ideas as you possibly can, then you start eliminating the ones which are impractical for one reason or the other. Could be from a budget perspective, from a technology perspective, from a company value perspective. And then you arrive at a short list of solutions to that problem. And so at this point, it becomes a reductive thinking approach. So you start with divergent thinking and you end with convergent thinking. Now, here are some examples: brainstorming, mind mapping, 6 thinking hats, worst possible idea, free writing, many other tools, right? Please go on the internet. You will find plenty of creative thinking tools out there. I've just given you the top 5, which I usually use in my own experience. And if you want to know a little more about each of these, take a screenshot of this, go on the internet and find it out. Or we can, if there's time for questions, and if I can answer a few questions later, I can probably answer how these things work. So once you ideate, you come out with a short list of ideas, and you've identified probably the top 1 or 2 or 3 ideas that you're going to work on. So that is where you use steps 4 and 5. Step 4 is prototype. As I shared with you earlier, the prototype is about creating an example of your desired product or user experience in a sandbox. A sandbox is basically not the wild world. It's not the real world, but rather a group of test subjects who are given specific instructions on how to use the product or the service and asked for feedback. So for example, in mobile companies, you have a process called dog fooding, right? Dog fooding is basically where you eat your own dog food, basically. In other words, if a mobile company is going to launch a series of mobile products, say 3 months and 6 months and 9 months down the line, then you can be sure that starting last year itself, sample versions of these products, the hardware with initial versions of software, have already been circulated to a limited group of dog fooders in the company, employees who, in addition to using their own phones, are using these phones on a day-to-day basis and giving feedback to the design thing. That's called dog fooding. Dog fooding is an example of prototyping, right? So you prototype and then you test, where you actually send your product out into a larger universe. So when you go beyond a limited group of test subjects into end users, a sample group of end users, and take their real life feedback, that is called testing. You can see examples of testing everywhere, but one example I can think of is in the movie industry. So with movies, you typically, once a production house has created the final cut of the movie, they don't just launch it in the theaters and kind of fold their hands and hope for the best. What they do is that they launch it in one theater with a group of viewers who have been specifically identified based on various demographic characteristics, which is run by a group of statisticians in the company. And these groups of demographics are all tested before and after the movie in terms of how the movie created an experience for them. And that's how, you have these mega movies like the Avengers series, the Marvel universe, and so on and so forth, rake in billions and billions of dollars. It's not an accident. Those movies have been perfectly engineered so that theater goers, exactly at specific points in the movie, have specific kinds of emotional reaction. In fact, if you did a bit of research on the internet, you would find that all of these movies have a common storyline to them. It's just that the characters and the look and feel varies. And the storyline is more or less a common Hollywood formula. We also have a Bollywood formula. So you have a formula movie, right? And Dabang 2, for example, everybody goes and watches it and likes Salman Khan tearing his shirt off. That's a formula. So prototypes and testing, these are the 2 differences. And then at the end of testing, what do? If your product is a product for mass manufacture, then you mass manufacture the product because you've got enough confidence this product is going to succeed in the market. If on the other hand, it's an experience, you're not going to mass manufacture an experience. You're going to allow it, integrate it into the way you run your business and allow your customers to experience that experience and therefore build customer loyalty and repeat customer business, right? Or you could be creating something which is for a niche customer set. For example, concierge services for high net worth individuals. This is not about mass manufacturing or mass rollout. Those services by definition are white glove services only available to a small group of people. And therefore, the more research and design thinking effort you put into that investment will pay back for itself many times over the next few years. And so you roll it out in a small way, but in a highly curated manner to that small group of high net worth individuals that you serve, probably as a bank, right? So these are examples of how this whole design thinking sequence of activities works. So you have rapid prototyping. Sorry, let me go back to the previous slide. Rigorous testing, agile development, crowdsourcing of ideas, MVP, minimum viable product. These are all examples of how prototyping and testing work in the real world. So to recap, there are 5 stages of the design thinking strategy: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and finally test. So I'm going to pause here. I believe that there is a quiz next. Yes, there is. So before moving on with the content of the program, we're going to give you a bit of time to internalize and integrate all of this knowledge. And I will turn it over back to Proda. Proda, you might want to run your questions now.
Yes, so today looks like I'm a good quiz master, right, Kaustav? Trying to check how the audience is understanding this subject. I think it was a very good explanation. Thank you so much. A lot of good and practical examples, Kaustav. So here is the question, and let me read it out for you. Which of the following is not part of step 3 of design thinking, that is idea? Which of the following is not part of step 3 of design thinking? Idea. A, brainstorming. B, thinking ahead. C, worst possible idea. And D, auto writing. Yes, so the right answer, Kaustav, do you want to?
Absolutely, the right answer is auto writing. Auto writing is
Yeah.
basically, you know, a stream of consciousness writing experience where you just pick up the pen, pick up a piece of paper, and write whatever comes to your mind. And you know, people use it as a therapeutic option in certain cases in psychological therapy. But we are not doing auto writing in design thinking. The specific phrase was free writing. You can Google it. There's a Wikipedia page on it, but we can answer questions on it later. Thank you. Back to you.
Very good, very good. Kaustav, just a quick time check. We have 15 minutes. I propose that we move to the dialogue part. I would say, you know, maybe I can take the control back again. Let us, you know, try. I hope I have the control again here. Yes, so here we have time for taking questions, guys. So you had a fantastic, you know, session today. As of now, you heard about the concept around design thinking, the stages around design thinking, and a lot of good examples, Kaustav, you know, that you shared. You know, thank you so much for that. So maybe, you know, we open it up for any questions. So the audience or boys and girls, any specific questions for me and Kaustav, and we can, you know, take some time to have a dialogue here. Yeah, so till, you know, the student ask some good questions, maybe I ask a question to Kaustav, right? So I started with the question that how a student, you know, should look design thinking in their day-to-day life. Now, you know, most of the students are in second year, right? And people are looking more from the job perspective. And we have this pandemic situation. So can we apply design thinking in our next 1 year and 2 year with a lot of problems around?
Absolutely. And in fact, I believe students intuitively do this already. But as we become professionals, we tend to lose that mindset and start working with what we have in the world instead. The big thing about design thinking is that you're consciously aware of opportunities to improve the experience of the world around you, right? So the most important thing for any of us, not just students, but all of us to do, is to constantly ask ourselves, how can something be made better in the immediate environment surrounding us? You know, it's as simple as, is there a different and a better way for the lighting in my room to be organized? Is there a different and a better way for the things in my house to be organized? You know, is there a different and a better way for some product that I use on a daily basis to be designed? Because if I have this kind of a mindset and opinion, I'm also sure to bring it down to my work. Now let's keep this in mind, right? One of the biggest pain points that we have in today's world are all these internet forms that we need to fill in. And any student will tell you, forms are some of the most abused design elements in the world. Clunky forms are the bane of modern digital existence. Apps that are poorly designed, forms that don't retain the right data or retain all the wrong data instead, forms with options that don't seem to work in any predictable fashion, radio buttons where checkboxes are required, checkboxes where radio buttons are required. Now, if one of our students in this group is going on to develop software, for example, and if that student could only please keep in mind that developing a form is not an inside-out exercise. You're not going to develop a form the way you see it. Rather, you should be developing the form the way user uses it, and that the form should be developed in such a way it is intuitive for the user. So you bring in the idea set, the concepts, the mentality of design thinking to your work. And so the outcome of that project is not just a clunky HTML form, but rather a beautifully designed user experience that focuses on the user's experience itself, that starts from there and works backwards. Then imagine how beautiful the world would be, right? You and I think this is where as professionals and as students, we need to refocus ourselves, is that anything and everything we do, even if you're only creating an Excel file, even if you're only drafting an email, can you draft it in such a way that the user is able to read it faster and grasp the key points better? Can you highlight the keywords? Can you give some spacing between the paragraphs? Even that is the design thinking mindset. So the most important thing all of us should do, I believe very strongly, is start thinking from the other person's point of view. This is what we call as the Copernican shift. If you remember, this was a phrase I used in the introduction, right? Nicholas Copernicus was the first astronomer in history, well, in Western history at least, to state openly that the Earth is not the center of our universe, that the sun is. Or rather, the Earth is not the center of the universe, but the sun is the center of the solar system in which the Earth is one of the planets, and that the center of the universe probably is elsewhere. And he was religiously persecuted for daring to propound this view. Because up to that point, all the astronomical charts that you can find in the Western world all have the Earth in the center, and the sky kind of shown as a dome, a firmament, as they used to call it, covering the Earth with no logical explanation. Who created this firmament? Why is it there? Why is it like, a dome? The flat Earth theory, in other words. Copernicus kind of turned that whole theory on its head and said, I'm not the center of the universe. I'm just one of the elements of it. So in the same way, I think all of us should be very conscious of the fact that we are not the centers of the universe. The reason we exist is to add value to everybody else around us. So put the customer in the center of your universe, and automatically you're adopting the design thinking philosophy. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Kaustav. It means that when I'm writing a mail to my boss, probably I can bring design thinking, right, in writing a simple email, which means that, it is simple. At the same time, my second question is that, is it always technical in nature? Is it only the engineers use it? Is it the, technological innovation we need to use design thinking? Can we bring design thinking in our day-to-day life, in our society, the way we probably play cricket, the way we have friendship? How easy or how simple it is?
Great question. And the answer there is design thinking is the prevalent language in the world, whether you acknowledge it or not. Traditionally, the approach was the designer would design and the market would dispose, So it's like man proposes, God disposes. Like that, the designer would design a product or an experience, and the best product or experience would be chosen by the market, which everybody else would copy. So this way, design thinking was being done in a backward fashion. What we are proposing right now is start your design process with the customer in mind, so that your first minimum viable product already is intuitive, already is easy to use. And you don't have to change your product or service much in response to customer feedback, because you've already put that hard work and effort into designing it in the first place. That's what is design thinking all about. To give you an example, you and I write emails on a daily basis. I'm not an engineer. Perhaps you are. But for me, in order to make sure that that email that I send out, even if it is one email, that it is perfectly read and the right action is taken by the right people, and the wrong people don't take any wrong action on it. In order to assure that outcome, I have a 4-minute time delay on my outbox. So when I click a mail, it goes and sits in the outbox for 4 minutes. I use Outlook. It's easy to program these rules in it. The reason it does that is because innumerable number of times, more than I can even remember, that has saved my reputation. Usually, I click send, it goes and sits in the mailbox. 4 minutes later, it leaves the outbox, and that's the end of it. But many, many times I've found that after clicking send button, I realize, oh my God, I should have done something else. It's as simple as attaching an attachment which I forgot, or attaching the wrong attachment and therefore correcting it later, or pull it back from the outbox, reopen it, highlight the right words, reword certain statements or phrases. Or if I felt that I was being too emotional or too indirect or too direct, reword those paragraphs in such a way that the communication is clear. So this is more than I can remember. It has helped me to become better at my email writing. To me, this is an example of a design thinking mindset. It's too far-fetched to term this as design thinking for sure. Design thinking is about designing an entire product or a service or an offering. But the mindset is the same, which is that I am thinking from my user's perspective and tailoring my actions to produce the most optimal outcome in that in their minds. That is what I'm thinking. So no, you don't have to be an engineer or a technical expert to use design thinking. The mindset is something every one of us should have. It's about putting your users, your customers, and your beneficiaries first.
Thank you, Kaustav. I personally, learned a lot today. The best learning is that it is simple. We all can use design thinking in our day-to-day life. So
Yep.
the last, time is here. Little bit, clock ticking. Any last questions? You can unmute the audience. You can unmute and you can put your questions, or you can also write in the chat options.
Can I ask a question? I'm Nikhil.
Yeah, Nikhil.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So firstly, hi Kaustav and Pranav. I really enjoyed the session. It was really fluid. So I understood the concepts. It was really good. So I'm Nikhil from. I'm a student of Human Resource Management from TISS Mumbai. So I'll ask a question in a very specific area of industry in terms of HR. My question is. Hello. Yeah. So my question is directed towards how do we manage employee engagement, especially in this era of COVID changing the nature of workforce. We are moving towards a workforce which is more or less blended, that is remote working as well as uh, office location. So how do you address the challenge of employee engagement, especially in this context of COVID? Thank you.
Okay. Someone.
You are muted, sir.
Trying to answer this question. Clotha, do you want to go first, and then I can add some thoughts as well? Pranab?
Your voice is not clear. So.
Sir, you are muted, sir.
No, I'm not muted actually. Can you all hear me?
No, I was on. I was on mute. Yeah, sorry. I tried to mute all, and then I missed to. Yeah, learning Zoom. Yeah, so I can take the questions, right? And you talked about the employee engagement. I understand, and how do we bring design thinking? And of course, we don't have much time, but let me give my version of design thinking. So what is employee engagement? In a simple way, we bring the empathy. What Postop talked about. We bring the perspective of solving a problem. For that employee to have a good experience with Volvo, right? We talk about improvement of our processes so that the employee has a very good employee life cycle from the joining to end, which means that there are many opportunities that you and me can have to bring design thinking in the way of working, not necessarily by introducing only, example robots. Nowadays say that, okay, for employee engagement, we need to bring robot. Answer is yes, because it simplifies the process. But we need to, think about the 5 stages as Postop has explained, and see that, how, relevant it can be. And sometimes it takes time, and we need to have, patience. We need to have a little bit more ideations, which, Postop talked about. We need to take support from the leadership, to have that ideation process, and then manage the employee experience. And as Postop said, when we talk about employee experience, we have to put the employee, at the center of the, all the processes, and then design. It is not that we bring many tools and try to push many tools to the employee. So we really need to, think from that perspective. So that's a very quick reflection, Postop. You are the expert. I hope, I could give some, meaningful insight here.
Okay, so Nikhil, thanks Prodha for that answer. My thought is design thinking puts the user at the center of the design process, right? So HR teams and especially HR leadership need to ask this very difficult question for themselves. Who is your user? Do you view the most important stakeholder in your functioning as the employee, or is it the leadership, the company management, right? And if you put both those people at the center of your experience, you might still say that, you know what, the outcomes may be the same. And I would agree. Over the long term, they may be the same. But over the short term, there can be some dramatic differences between the two. So I'm going to take a bit of a risk here, go out on a limb, and I'm going to put the employee at the center of the HR design experience mindset, right? So when I put the employee at the center, you said that we are going to work more and more in a blended form going forward. I agree with you. I think predominantly companies are today facing this problem of working from home. And some companies are able to work with that well, others are not. There's many reasons why the difference is there. One reason is the type of industry you're talking about. If it's a manufacturing setup, you can't probably manufacture at home. But if it's a service that you're providing, you probably have more flexibility in having more of your people working from home. But even there, some functions like plant machinery, maintenance, security, these people will still need to be at physical premises and so on. So that being the case, I think all companies have to solve this one for themselves as to what extent they're able to have a blended workforce and to what extent they're not. But having said that, one common problem that many companies are facing today is rejigging their policies in order to suit this new world that we're living into. So some of the earliest objections that we in HR have had when it came to remote working or virtual working was managers complaining that productivity is lost when people are working from home. Now, for some of us, this is a bit of a joke because we've been working from home for decades. In my case, I probably started working from home 12, 13, 15 years, 20 years, 18 years back. And on the contrary to productivity, what I'm saying is my productivity is only increased. But for many managers, this is a real struggle. They feel that productivity will be negatively impacted. What COVID has shown is the reverse is true. When people are working from home, you don't have to be worried about drop in productivity. You should be worried about burnout. People are working so long and so hard because commute time is reduced. They're stuck with their laptops from dawn to dusk, and you don't realize it's getting dark outside. That more people are complaining of burnout and eye fatigue and ergonomical problems than ever before. If, as a HR team, you put your employee at the center of your design exercise, and you ran a design thinking exercise on how to redesign your policies in this way, in this environment, one of the first things that you would do is to empathize with your employee. Try and figure out what the employee's scenario is, not just what the company's scenario is. And I'm a member of many HR groups, and I'm finding people on either side of the argument. There is a group of people who come out and say, we are trying to make our employees' lives more easier. So when we put this new work from home policy in place, we gave them $1,000 each and said, go and buy anything that you want. If it's a computer chair or a desk or a better broadband connection, and that we're giving you a monthly allowance. We're supporting you in terms of having these tech support people who are ready to get on a call with you and help you install all this new software. And there's huge change management and communication and training programs going on in companies to help people change their way of working and relate to this new way of working. But on the other hand, we've got a bunch of people who come up on these groups and make comments like, we have a policy, part of our policy is that you should have your camera mandatorily on when you're working. Why? Because we want to see that you're working. Now, there's a lively debate that goes on between who is right and who's wrong here. But I tend to fall on the side of the former group of people. And why? Because we're using design thinking as the touch point to design these policies. So how do you improve engagement? I think the answer is, number one, engagement is deeply impacted by the company's systems, policies, and practices. And if you go to redesign your systems, policies, and practices in the current world, if you use the design thinking methodology to do it, you're likely to end up with a far more productive and far more engaged workforce than if you kind of do a traditional reductive thinking methodology where you're looking at the company's priorities first. Secondly, from the individual's perspective, I think it's important to look at each individual as an ocean unto themselves and use design thinking to figure out where they are. So a manager needs to use the mindset of empathy to relate to their team members. Colleagues need to use the mindset of empathy to relate to each other. So If you're in a video call today, for example, and there's a relative that walks by behind one of the team members, and that causes the others to get distracted, I think we're missing the point. So if you use empathy, you realize that these are, someone's bandwidth goes down, someone's not audible for a part of the time. Right now, someone seems to have their mic on, they shouldn't, but I understand and we're still going on. So these kind of empathy-oriented transactions, these are very, very important in adapting to this new way of working. And it is as, empathy is the first step of design thinking. So that's another way in which I think the right kind of philosophy, the design thinking philosophy can help improve engagement. Now, this is really a much bigger answer. I think we should take it offline, but this is just to give you a quick response in this case.
Thank you, Kaustav. I think, for us, this discussion is becoming, very fruitful. And of course, time is clicking, me as a host, probably I have to, go to the end part of the, program here. And I would say that all the students, you can always be in touch with me, and Kaustav's put questions to us on LinkedIn. And of course, we are here to support all of you, right? So Minal, so let us find out who are the top three, who probably came first, the 1, 2, 3, and then we are going to talk to them again. Can you put the names on the chat?
Yeah, sure. The names.
So just to introduce, as I said, Minal is actually a student in Syscom Mumbai. She's doing an internship with us under a program called Super Internship. Minal is a very bright student. And then I requested her support to find out the top 3 winner. So Minal, time is clicking. Can you please help me either tell the name here or put that? Yes, number 1 is Assis. Hello, Assis. Congratulations. Number 2, Nikhil and Girti. So are you guys around here?
Yeah, we are here.
Oh, very good. I want to give a clap to all of you, to be very participative. And thank you so much, to give those, quick answers and make the webinar, very, very meaningful. We have kept an activity, but probably from the time point of view, we skip it here. And my conclusion, as we have said, that design thinking is not solely for designer and engineer. It's for my son also. My son has come here to join all of you. So in fact, I would say that it's a process even you and me can practice in day-to-day life. So with that, I want to thank you all once again, especially to Postop, for giving those, meaningful insight. Postop did a fantastic program within Volvo, for our leadership team. And today 90 minutes is probably a little short because this subject is very insightful. I hope all of you got, at least the essentials of design thinking. You can go back to, many other, learning platform like Coursera and try to get deeper understanding of design thinking. Try to bring design thinking in your day-to-day, job. Postop and me talked about, if you write a WhatsApp message to your friend, you can bring design thinking. Write an email to your professor, you can bring design thinking. Organize a cricket tournament in your college, bring design thinking. So I would say that, this is a fantastic evening for me. And Postop, maybe the last comment from your side, to thank the audience here.
Yep, thank you. Thanks to everybody who joined the session. Parting words will be that design thinking is not about design, it's about the human experience. And so as long as we put people first, I think design thinking aspect will take care of itself. So let's recommit to being more empathetic, both at work as well as in our personal lives. And having said that, Pronob, thank you for the opportunity. It was wonderful working and collaborating with you. And Change It All, it's a pleasure working with you guys on this initiative. And look forward to many more such experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So here we end the webinar for today. Thank you once again.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.